So my name's Ellen Boyle, Women in Trucking Association, and I'm going to give you a little bit about women in trucking. How many of you are members? Raise your hands. Okay, well, maybe after this, we'll turn you all into members. We're a nonprofit association, and our mission is pretty simple: to increase the percentage of women employed in the trucking industry. So our mission is threefold. It's to encourage the employment of women in the industry, to address obstacles that might keep women from either entering or staying in the industry, and to celebrate the success of our members. We have nearly 5,000 members in 10 countries. And guess what? 19% of our members are men. Why would men join Women in Trucking? Because they believe in our mission. And again, to get more women in the trucking industry. So let me introduce our members, and I still have a little bit more data that I want to share with you. But first, Patricia Durkin, Patty, Vice President of Human Resources at AIM Leasing Company, welcome. Susan Porter, President and CEO of C. Blackburn Inc., a U.S. mail contractor from Elizaville, New York. Joanna Bradeen, Chief Financial Officer of Hart Transportation Systems, Inc. in Bangor, Maine. And Shannon Van Roo, Marketing Regulatory Affairs Analyst at Acuity Insurance in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And last but not least is Kelly Patrick, President and CEO of Kennesaw Transportation, Atlanta, Georgia. All right, ladies, so we're gonna have fun. What we're going to do, the format will be, I'm going to ask them some questions, but then about halfway through, we're gonna turn it over. We know that you'll have questions, especially because I'm gonna bring things out of them that you might not have thought of. So then we're gonna open it up to the audience and you'll be able to ask questions. But first I wanna give you some data. We do a Women in Trucking Index, and this past year, 23.75% of managers in the trucking industry are women. That's 23.75% of the management team is comprised of women. And that's not good. That's only 1 of 4. In the publicly traded companies, 75%, only 75% have women on their boards, and only 40% of the publicly traded companies have women in management, 40%. So we're tracking that. And so one of the things that I like to ask, and I'm gonna ask this audience first, how many of you, when you were in high school, and ladies, I want you to respond too, when you were in high school, you said, I want to work in the transportation industry? Raise your hand. Okay, very few, very few. So how do we get here? And what makes us stay? And that's what you're gonna find out. So I'm gonna start, Kelly, I'm gonna have you go first because you're closer to me. What brought you into the transportation industry?
My mom and dad.
There you go.
They started a company in 1981 and I was 16 years old. And, started out doing logs on the kitchen room table and going to high school. And then when I graduated, went to college and didn't want to go to college, which I would encourage everybody to go to college and get their degree. And then I went to work for my dad.
There you go. Shannon?
When I was 18 and graduated from high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so I got a job at a truck stop, and that kind of piqued my interest, I guess. And from there, I learned how to drive through people that I met there, got my CDL when I was 19, and then realized that it's super hard to find a job when you're under 21. So I got a job working as a quad axle dump truck driver and kind of went from there.
A dump truck driver?
Yep.
Got it. Joanna?
I got into the trucking industry after taking a 1-year sabbatical from working at a bank in Boston. I applied for a job doing payroll for a trucking company, a family-owned company in Maine, and was tapped to work with the treasurer to work on a cost model, and said, this is kind of interesting work. And 30 years later, I'm still doing it. Not at the same company.
Go ahead.
So I'm a third generation mail contractor. So both of my parents at one point, my father, he had the company, his grandfather, 1960, and it involves contracts with the United States Postal Service. The only thing we haul is the US mail. The contracts are renewed, so it's not like you have the same contract the whole time. But even in high school, I just wanted to be a secretary. I did go to school, I have an accounting degree, And I got the degree because I knew I could use it in the business. So I've just always wanted to.
And Patty?
Really wasn't transportation as much as that I'm in human resource. So I found it, but my very first job was also transportation. It was just because my older sister went to school with a new owner. So they came up and asked if I could work the summer before I graduated high school. And my parents said, sure, she will. So transportation is like secondary to how I got in.
So Patty, I'm going to start with you. Do you think it's getting easier for women to enter transportation careers?
I do. I think just even looking out this is the first time I've come to a summit and I see so many women in human resource, and what I've always done in my life is, try to help women and help them accomplish things. But I think there's a lot of reasons, and a lot of it is what we heard throughout this whole conference. We're short on drivers. So we're another good resource. And we've been talking a lot about getting younger people in and getting veterans in. And I think social media is helping that situation because it's a faster pace. So if you want to save money, then yes, it's easier. We have a long way to go, and that's okay too. We just want to get a little better all the time.
We've come a long way as well. I was one of those who raised my hand, 40 years in the industry and 12 years at Women in Trucking. And the reason we created the WIT index is to monitor that. And women now make up 7.89% of over-the-road drivers. That's over the road. And so many years ago, you didn't see women in trucks at all. And now women are becoming more visible. And all they want is a level playing field, right?
Right.
Women don't want front row parking. They don't want anything special. They just want a level playing field. And there's a lot of unconscious bias in this industry. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But what opportunities, Susan, what opportunities exist for women, and why would they want to work in the trucking industry?
So for me, the only thing we haul is US mail, and the US mail is on a schedule. The schedule is actually sometimes as tight as 5 minutes. And I do know a lot of women who have worked in our industry, because you could still put your kids on a bus, go deliver the mail, and come back on a scheduled time. The other thing is maybe not as tractors, but there's a lot of straight truck drivers that are women Class B. It seems to be a lot easier. I have van drivers that are women, a lot of van drivers too. So it really depends, but for us, it's like a perfect fit for a male contracting, for a woman who needs to be on a schedule, because let's face it, we are the ones having the babies. So there is a period of time where we are not sometimes in the workforce at the same time. So you might see more, I think I'm finding more women that are a little bit older coming into the trucking part of it. Maybe they've already raised their children are in school, and now this is something, that they've taken up.
And I'd like to give the date on that. The average age of a female driver coming into the industry is about 50. She's raised her family, like you just said.
Yeah.
83% of women who come into the trucking industry as drivers do so because of a family member or friend. And typically that is a husband or a boyfriend will say, hey, you've raised the kids, they're out of the house, go get your CDL and come out on the road with me. So you hit it on the head. Joanne, I want you to answer that same question about opportunities for women in the industry.
I think in order to have good opportunities for women, we have to offer vertical opportunities. And I've been in the business 30 years and I got some great opportunities, but people don't always look to women to take roles, primarily like management roles, but we have probably 10 female operators that manage, a good sized fleet of drivers, 20, 30, 40 drivers. Also, I think coaching and personal development are very important. Trucking is a very interesting line of work. There's a lot of data, there's a lot of statistical information. I mean, many people think that, I've been kind of made to feel that trucking is kind of big, dirty, and ugly, but quite frankly, trucking is extremely data-driven in the cloud. Like a truck might have 19 applications in cloud, and so there are opportunities for women to be part of, taking that data and looking at it. I think we also have an intern program primarily in our IT and accounting area. And we don't always get long-term people, but we get some short-term people that work for us for 4 or 5 years while they're in college. And they really fill in for summer positions and such. And you tend to get really talented people. And then also when you're a woman in trucking, being a good role model to the other women in your business, supporting them and showing them the way.
And you are a role model. You're under a microscope, especially in the boardroom and in the upper management, because you are representing other women and you are a minority.
I think our executive committee's 7 members, 1 woman, 6 men.
It's not atypical. So Shannon, I want you to talk a little bit about opportunities for drivers. You started out as a dump truck driver. Now you work for Acuity Insurance in the regulatory area because you have firsthand knowledge. So do you think there is upward mobility for the driver population, and maybe talk a little bit about your experience?
For my experience, I don't know if it's so much upward mobility. It was probably a lateral move salary-wise.
Actually, I'm glad that you said that, because why would I just assume working in an office is upward mobility?
Yeah,
Right.
I probably could make more money if I drove a truck, but as it was, my life circumstance didn't really allow for that. So I think, when I got the job at Acuity, I didn't really know a whole lot about what they did there. And they were kind of walking me around, introducing me to people, and they introduced me to the trucking specialist. And I said, oh, haha, funny, I have my CDL. And they were like, oh, would you like to be in the trucking team? So I think it's important for people to remember that wherever you start in trucking, there are ways to be involved in transportation industry overall, between driving or owning a business, or the vendors and all the different areas that service the trucking industry. And it's important to remember that the background that you gain as you grow and change throughout different periods of your life allow you to sort of provide different experiences and participate in trucking in different ways. So and I have a little bit different background than these ladies, where when we owned our trucking company, it was a small family, but like small, like we had 2 trucks. So it's a different experience, but I think everybody can find the right fit for them if they want to be involved.
But what I hear from drivers is the reason they want to drive a truck is because they don't want someone watching over them, like in a cube or in an office. So sometimes I wonder if the criteria that you need, the personality that you need to drive a truck, to be able to be alone for long periods of time, to be very independent, to be self-motivated, things like that, and not a risk taker. That's huge, especially in the insurance. You don't want a driver to be a risk taker, but yet, once you move into the office, you need to be a risk taker.
Yeah, and I think too, in either role, you need to be a self-starter. If you're in the office, you have to be able to have that initiative to follow through for the people that are depending on you to provide support to them. And if you're on the road, you need to be able to follow through and do what the people in the office need from you.
So Kelly, talk a little bit about being in a family business. Your mom and dad started the Kennesaw, and so you are now president and CEO. Congratulations on your new title. Talk a little bit about some of the challenges of being in a family business, especially being a woman in the trucking industry in a family business.
Oh, boy.
And
Bias.
Susan, we'll ask you that question too.
It's bias, I think. The stigma out there is males dominate and rule. My father felt that, and my brother, who's younger, he trained and raised him to run the company. And just recently he's resigned and I've taken over, but I've always been there in the shadows, working behind the scenes. And now I'm up front and personal. So the education, I think it would have helped if I had continued my education and received my degree. I've had to learn things the hard way, school of hard knocks, mistakes, and I benefit from them, and I've moved forward, and I do like to take risks. The risk have paid off so far, and we just keep going forward. My dad passed away in 2014, and my mother is now the owner of the company. And I have a nephew and an in-law, and so we're still pretty much family oriented. My daughter's on the front row, but she's not, she doesn't have a desire yet to be in trucking.
You said yet.
Yet.
We're working on her. Susan, why don't you answer that question too?
So my mom answers the phone for me. Michael, don't record this, but most of the time she doesn't get the names right, but she wants to be in the office. My dad is 77, works like a dog still because he likes to work. This has been what he likes to do. But it took a little bit of change when I will say I feel bad at times because what you did 20 years ago is not what needs to be done now. And I'll just go and make the example, a great example of the kind of insurance that you get, the kind of broker that you have. What you bring to the table now is very different. The kind of trucks that you buy, the kind of equipment that you put on the road is very different in this day and age than my dad. And at one point, duct tape was a good thing. Duct tape was wonderful. I mean, we had duct tape on every piece of equipment you could make, but it's just not the same anymore. So I think a lot of family businesses, because I've talked to a lot of people in my organization, that is one of the big changes when the younger generation does come up and they step up. And again, it's just that little bit of change, not that they did anything wrong, not at the time, everything was done right. But right now, there's a change, you know, and I have a younger brother in our shop. My husband's our fleet supervisor. My son, Michael, is our operations manager and safety director. I have at one point I had 3 nephews in the shop. Gosh, don't do that. And right now I hire people from the family, but the new rule is I have to be there for the hiring to happen because sometimes they slip in when I'm at meetings and they're very hard to fire when you get family members. So
I can't even imagine.
yeah, so that's the hard part with the family, business. I'm going to go for that.
So I always like to say, every large trucking company out there, whether the trucks are orange, they're yellow, blue, whatever, they all started with a man in a truck, right? Every one of those big mega carriers out there started with a man in a truck. And it used to be Smith & Sons, and you'd even see that, you know? And now more daughters are taking over their businesses and it's acceptable. And so I think that's one of the positive changes that I've seen in the past 40 some years is that it's not just, you're not automatically excluded because you're the daughter, you know, go ahead.
And I have to say that in my organization of male contractors, we're not excluded at all. There are a lot of women that are the CEOs and presidents of their trucking companies. I had a great mentor for years. My grandmother was the secretary of my business for years and years and years. But there's a lot of women in the trucking organization. So I do not feel, I have to tell you, in my whole life, I never felt that I was any different than any other owner who was a male.
So Patty, let's ask you this one. What would you tell women who are thinking of entering the trucking industry? And a lot of women, like I said, don't think about it. I'm excited now. We have a scholarship foundation and we see more women entering supply chain, which is amazing. So what advice would you give women? I think we're kind of in a tipping point because 12 years ago, trucking companies would say to me, I don't care the gender of the driver, I don't care the age of the driver, I don't care the ethnicity, I don't care, I just want a good driver. And now they're seeing what women bring to this industry. They're seeing the value. We can talk about safety, but women are safer drivers, that's been proven now. Women take fewer risks in the boardroom, women lead differently. The last speaker talked about engagement. Women have much higher levels of engagement with their employees, which leads to retention. So Patty, let's go back to what advice would you give women coming into the transportation industry?
Well, I think a lot of women just make lower wages. So the very first thing I would say is this is a great place to be and make wages. And then where have you traveled that you haven't seen a truck? So this is such a great opportunity. Although we are getting into drones and some of the automatic trucks and things like that, but for the most part, this isn't going overseas. You know, just keep looking how many needs are out there for you. So if you want to go into an occupation, and guess what? They want you. They need you. And you have a great opportunity. But when you're looking at your pros and cons, you have to be realistic. And just like any other job, find the right company. I think the hardest thing with male or female, this job is very hard because as a company, I can not control my culture, but we know what our culture is. And if I don't like that culture, I leave. But your dispatchers are at companies that they're picking up their culture as well. If they're truck drivers, they're going in and out of a lot of different businesses that have different cultures. And to me, that's so hard. And so I think for different women, it's going to be to find the culture you want, but find the company that you want. But definitely look at the money. I mean, that's what we're all about. It's a great place to raise a family, and the job is going to be there.
The United States Department of Workforce Development has found that women in non-traditional careers typically make 25% more than women in traditional careers, which would be secretary, things like that. So just by going into the trucking industry, you're already elevating, your level of income. I'd like to open it up, and I can keep asking questions if you want me to, but I know that you want to tap into some of this wisdom. So anybody have any questions? And I think there's mics. Are there microphones walking around? Maybe I caught him off guard. And I can't see, so you're gonna have to stand up or something if you have a question. All right, I'm gonna keep going. So I told you ladies I was gonna ask you a couple questions. What would you like to say to your 21-year-old self? And Kelly, I'm gonna start with you and go down the line. What advice would you have given your 21-year-old self?
Stay in school. Don't get in trucking. No.
Oh, can we go back 8-second delay on this?
Okay, erase that. No, I love trucks. I love trucking. I think it's incredible. It's challenging. And I would just say, do what I want to do and finish my degree and keep working. Just hard, with the challenges that come at me, and take people for what they say, their wisdom, listen to what they have to say and apply it, and try to not make the same mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Shannon?
I think I would take a little twist on that, in that I have a 17, 14, and 10-year-old daughter. And I think about what I say to them every day, which is, if you want to be in trucking, do it. I mean, my 17-year-old has decided at this point, who knows, it'll change probably, that she doesn't want to go to college at this time. But, I was 36 when I got my bachelor's degree, and I had a lifetime of experience before that. And I think it's important to remember that even if you're in a truck, if you want to get a degree, you can do that. So many colleges have online courses, and if sitting behind the wheel isn't what you want to do for the rest of your life, maybe you want to own a truck or have a fleet of trucks, you can do both. So I think it's just keep your mind open and pursue what you want to pursue, and don't let anybody tell you that you can't.
Joanna?
I thought about this yesterday, but at 21, I don't think you really know enough about what the world has to offer. So when I was 21, I was kind of looking at the whole country, and I moved around quite a bit. So I quit college and went back afterwards. So I think there's a theme here of people that started college and left college. But when I was 26, I went back to college and got my MBA. But other than that, I think I did what I wanted when I was 21.
Okay. Susan?
So I'm doing exactly what I've always wanted to do. I mean, I'm blessed. I mean, extremely blessed that I get to work with my dad every day. My husband's office is right down the hallway. I get to make his lunch and dinner every day. How blessed could I be? I have a son who works with me every day. I just have had, my dad has been a great mentor. And although I've made mistakes, I can remember one time in the middle of the night, I used to get the phone calls for all the broken down trucks, and my husband did not like to be woken up in the middle of the night, and he's in charge of the shop. So you would think I could nudge him and get those answers, and that didn't happen. But one time I told the driver to do something that maybe I should have had to do something else. And I came to work the next day, and Dad said, well, don't make that mistake the next time. The first time's a mistake. He said, you could have done this, this, and this to get the truck started or truck going. And I said, all right. He says, hey, it's just a mistake when you make it the first time. If you make it 2 or 3 times, you're done. Yeah. But just the first time, it's a mistake. I must have spent a little bit of extra money towing it or something. And so I always think that I've just had a great mentor. I've had, everything has fallen into place, and my kind of business has always been, everyone in it has always been really helpful.
Patty?
I guess I've also, been lucky, but I always kind of try to relate when I'm in human resource to things that are in trucking. I say, we tell our drivers all the time, don't back up. That's the only way to avoid a backing accident. Don't back up. And always look forward. So I would say just look forward. You're going to make mistakes, learn from them. That's the school of hard knocks. I was also, another passion of mine, I was a vocational school student, but I went to Catholic school. So it was frowned upon because you only paid half the tuition, and you went, and at my age, it was the kids that weren't too bright and didn't have any intention of going to college went to vocational school. Well, I didn't know that, which is a good thing because I probably wouldn't go. My mom was a nervous wreck, that I was gonna be at the public school half the day. But I think that experience did so much for me because I just kept looking at what I wanted to do, how I was gonna get there. And the only reason I went to college is because I thought my husband was gonna get transferred out of town. And living in a small town, it is a lot of, who you know, not what you know. So I thought I better go to college in case I had to. So I would just say, same thing, keep looking forward. And again, I was blessed by a good family and so much support. And hopefully as women, that we could continue to support other women who maybe don't have what we have.
And I'm glad you said that because, all right, so during a break, I stood in the women's restroom and there was actually a line in there. And typically at a trucking event, there's never a line in the women's restroom. So I'm gonna start measuring the length of time it takes to get to one of the stalls and see if we're making progress in this industry. That's a bad measure, but you all know, for those of you who have been in the industry for 20 years or even 30 years or whatever, you'd go to an American Trucking Association event or a Truckload Carriers event, and there'd be 3 women who weren't spouses in the audience. And we'd search each other out and we'd say, wow, what do you do? And so, I think it's so refreshing to see so many females in the audience, and especially younger females, because I think, in the past, we all know that trucking was considered atypically male. It's still male dominated, but women are coming in at much higher numbers. And I think part of it is because we're changing the image.
And I think, Ellen, we should also mention, I did send in something, but I don't think you have to drive a truck to be in the transportation industry.
Oh, no, yeah.
I failed my driver's test, I'll admit it. My father was so happy I failed, because he said, if you're in the truck, we're not making money in the office. So yes, there's a place, we all need the drivers, do not get me wrong, but there's a place in a trucking association or a trucking company, even if you don't drive the truck.
Yes.
I came from the very bottom where all I did was hand out tolls. We're from New York, so that's a big part of your day. Hand out tolls when I was a very young girl, to the point where you started doing dispatching, to the start of doing contracts, all the way up. Can I drive a truck around the yard? Yes. Do I need to get on the road? No. So I think that just because you don't drive a truck doesn't mean that you don't belong in the transportation industry.
And I totally agree, Susan. At Women in Trucking, our association, I like to say it's the women who design the trucks, build the trucks, sell the trucks, fix the trucks, own the trucks, drive the trucks, whatever, dispatch the trucks. It's all women in the industry, and we are increasing our ranks, which I think is great. So I'm gonna throw this one out at any one of you. Do you think there's still any unconscious bias why are you smiling, Patty? Go ahead. Do you think there's still some unconscious bias in the trucking industry?
Yes, and that's one of the things that I think a lot about. And you had mentioned that statistic about how women are better drivers, but what do we always say? Oh, that woman driver. And yet we also say that men never ask for direction, but more men are truck drivers, like they're driving all over the place, so. But when they put the GPS in, it's a woman telling them where to go.
I never thought about that.
So it works on both sides of the bias. But I think if you do anything, forget the myth. Like your job description doesn't say, go find a man that will do this, this, and this. So maybe look at a few suggestions. Some of you want to do this so bad, you may just not know how to do it. And believe me, we sense that whole listening thing that people were talking about through this whole conference is that genuineness. When you try so hard, it comes off to us as, well, they've never had a woman working for them. But I think as women, sometimes, you're 100% right when you said earlier that we just want what everybody else wants. We don't want really anything extra special. But I was actually thrilled at the one meeting where they said women are better drivers. So maybe take the myths out. Contact people like Women in Trucking. Ask other women, ask people in human resource, that have open ideas to where you can find people and how you could get them in. So, same thing out in the field. I think it's so much more acceptable because gender is getting less important to people. It's who's doing the job. I think that's the best thing that this generation has brought to us.
Well, and by having more women in leadership roles, we're reducing the unconscious bias. Although women have as much unconscious bias as men, so I'm not saying that that's a male thing, but think about this piece of data. Hewlett-Packard found that women will apply for a job when they have 60% of the qualifications, and men will apply at 100%. Think about how that applies to the driver population. You would hear all the time where when I worked for Schneider National in the recruiting and retention area, and a female driver would say, or potential female driver would say, well, I can't learn to shift. And a guy would go, I think I can drive a truck. I don't know how to shift, but you're going to teach me, right? Or a woman will say, and then we're talking about the duct tape, a woman will say, well, I'm not technology, I'm not mechanically minded. And I'm like, who fixes their trucks these days? Nobody. Do your drivers get in under the hood? And no, they're not. And so I think we as an industry and have an image problem because women have this image, women outside the industry have this image of what the inside of the industry is like. Would you agree? And that's where I'm saying the unconscious bias is. I think a lot of women talk themselves out of coming into the industry because they think they're not valued and they're not wanted or they're not needed or that they can't do the job. Shannon?
I think it's important for companies that want to attract women to work for them as drivers in particular. It's good to put some thought into a good mentorship or training program if you're able to support that sort of a thing. And not all insurance companies are comfortable with it. Not all companies have the capital or the ability to do that. But the behind the wheel requirements and all those rules that are kind of coming down the pipeline here, it's important to think about the relationships that you want to set up between a mentor and a driver. And are they situations where a woman would be comfortable? Because that's going to be a long-term relationship. I mean, you're looking at a fair chunk of hours for behind the wheel. And I think it's something that every company who wants to do that can. It's just how do you put in the upfront work to make it successful?
Any other ladies want to jump in on the unconscious bias, Joanna?
Well, yeah, I'd like to just, some of the things that may occur that probably as maybe a male manager may not know, but say you're putting your list together of like driver of the month and say you have 400 drivers and 60 of them are female. I would bring up like, I haven't seen any of our female drivers ever nominated. It's almost like they are secondary in some ways. Now, maybe this is true, that the quantifications may not be exactly the same, but I think to keep people coming into the industry, I mean, highlighting one a year, even though they represent such a small amount of your population of drivers, might be a good thing to do. Same with some of our, supervisors that, you're looking at accolades at the end of the year. It seems as though that very often they might be overlooked.
Okay, so I want to comment on that. There's more data on how women are reluctant to negotiate salaries because it makes us feel uncomfortable because we want to be liked. We're also uncomfortable to raise our hand and brag about what we've done, where men typically don't think it's bragging. They'll say, hey, I just saved the company $5 million. And for women, and I'm just stereotyping, I'm being, give me data, but for women, typically, they'll think that somebody's going to recognize that they're doing a good job and point that out. And so the advice I would give is, for all you women in the room, especially the younger women, raise your hand and tell them, hey, I saved the company money, or I just did this, or I just got a new customer. And you know what? It's not bragging. It's justifying your value in the company. And also, don't think you need 100% of the qualifications to go to that next job, because if you do, if you already have 100% of the qualifications for the next job, aren't you already overqualified? Shouldn't you be moving on above that? And it's okay to speak up. And one study, women actually underreported their grade point average in college because they'll tell people they have a lower grade point average because they don't want to brag and they want to think so take that into consideration when you have your female managers. They're being humble because we're more collaborative. It's the estrogen, it's like we want to be liked. And so we have a different way of leading than men do. So women will, in making a decision, will look at all the options and try to expand the options and then look at all of them and try to make the best decision. Where men will shorten the list of options and then make the decision. So if you've got women and men in leadership roles and the men think, well, wait, make a quick decision and get to it. And women are like, well, no, but did you explore this option? Neither one is right or wrong. It's just understanding that women make decisions differently and lead differently. So any comments?
No, but I would think if you knew that your boss was a woman, I would attract more women drivers. And I don't think that we don't. I just don't know how many are out there. When you look at I look at what we do, we deliver the mail. It's a very safe product. No one has to pick anything up. It's not like you're using a forklift or anything else. Everything's on either rolling stock or the post office moves off pallets. But it is night work. A lot of it is at night, which is, of course, a lot of trucking. And how safe do you feel, working at that point at night as a woman? Now, let's just go back. Let's be honest. I mean,
safety is huge.
Safety is a huge, let's say just the safety of the person, And so there is some safety. And if you're a husband and your wife is out there at 2 a.m. and she goes to the parking lot to pick up the truck, maybe you're not feeling that she's as safe as she could possibly. I mean, I'm just looking at it from an outside point of view, that from safety point of it. I do know that a lot of women are great drivers. And all of our new trucks, let's face it, guys, we're putting brand new trucks on the road. We're putting beautiful pieces of equipment on the road. It's better than your car. Some people's cars, our trucks are. So, and everybody in my business goes home at night. I don't have any over the road people. Everybody goes home. So I have what I think is a great woman owner. We've got other women in the company. I've got other women drivers. You would think that you would feel comfortable. So I don't know what the answer is, what I'm trying to tell you. I don't know how to attract more women into it. I think it's got to start at the bottom. But as you said, if the average age of a woman driver is 50, maybe we've been trying to start at the bottom, and really the objective is to look for people that have already come to like a second.
And safety is important for drivers. We did a best practices study, on a scale of 1 to 10, the average safety, the female drivers responded with a 4.4. So that tells us we have a long way to go. And when I say safety, I'm going to say 3 areas. One is, how do you maintain your equipment? Women don't want to be stuck on the side of the road. Men don't either. But for women, personal safety takes a higher priority. Secondly, what's your culture? Do you say, oh, well, inclement weather, oh, you can handle that. Well, guess what? That's not safety. And the third one is, where are you sending them? So if you're sending them in areas that might be unsafe, that could drive women away as well. We've got some time. I'm still curious. Anyone have any questions? There's so much wisdom up here. You'd think we want to tap. There we go. There's a question.
As a woman in trucking management, what advice do you have to me for dealing with those biases?
So the question is, as a woman in trucking and management, what advice do you have for dealing with the biases? Who wants to take that one on?
I think you should do you. Just work hard. Show them that you can do what you can do. Take the risk, step up to the challenge, and you'll succeed. The bias is getting better. I see a lot of women out here, and I think it's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I think that the old school truckers and management are taking people, women and men, under their wings and mentoring them. And I'm very glad to see that it's getting better in the industry. Because I've been in it 35 years and I think it's wonderful.
And that's a
Just
great
do
piece.
you.
The mentor part of it is a great piece of advice. We should all be mentoring and helping pull the women up behind us and helping them be successful. So, and the other piece of advice I would say is speak up. Make sure that you speak up. And one other thing that, if there's one thing that all of the women in this room take back, is stop apologizing for everything. Okay? Do you ladies agree with me? I mean, a young woman stood
Yeah,
up.
there's a book out, says stop apologizing.
Well,
girl.
and because if we start out by saying, well, I'm sorry to interrupt you, or I'm sorry that whatever, don't just say, hey, do you have a second? Because putting ourselves in that position by saying, I'm sorry all the time, just makes us look weak. So Kelly, you want to comment on that?
Being weak?
No. No. About saying I'm sorry?
Oh, yeah, I agree. I feel like as a mom and as a wife and a family member, you're always going around saying, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that, I didn't mean to do that. No, just own what you do. If you make a decision, stand by it, stick to it, and write it out.
And own
that's
it.
all you can do.
Own it. I
Just
love it
own
that you said that. Own it. Any other questions?
On that, I'd like to
go
jump
ahead.
in. And it doesn't work in all situations, although my family is rather sarcastic. And so sense of humor sometimes. Do you ever have that person, not at this company that I'm at, but the biases? And this one gentleman always just looked at me like, oh, she's weak. Oh, is she gonna cry? Oh, da 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 da. And sometimes I would just do that. Like he'd say something and I'd be like, he'd be like, what's the matter? And I'm like, I don't know. I just assumed you expected me to start crying. So I gave you, kind of give them what they want and say, I never do that every day. Again, I know in human resource, I show up at a facility and they're like, who are you gonna fire? I haven't fired 5 people outside. I'm a decision maker, but I don't go in and fire people. But yet that's the prejudice that people have. But I think sometimes sense of humor does work. Not that you're good at it, but if that's kind of your personality, it will work for you.
All right, I've got 3 minutes left. So what I'm gonna do is, oh, we've got a question. Okay. Thank you.
Your question or comment about women being stripper truck driving champions. So Barbara Herman gave them this 2019 National Tank Truck Carrier.
Yes. National Tank Truck Carrier, she is the champion. And we love it. We just jump up and down when we see that. Because years ago, women didn't even enter the truck driving championships. And so now they're much more visible and winning. Yay. All right, my last question. I'm gonna start with you, Kelly. You know what this is. What propels you out of bed in the morning and what keeps you up at night?
Profit, baby. Profit every morning. And what do I think about at night? I try to do a gratitude list and give thanks for everything that I've been through that day and just reflect on my day. But yeah.
Shannon, what propels you out of bed in the morning and what keeps you up at night?
I think for me, it's curiosity. I like to learn new things and just, it's a puzzle, figure things out. And what keeps me up at night, I would say kids, making sure I got 5. So,
The 5 kids keep you, okay.
yeah, it's a journey.
Joanna?
I have a lot that keeps me up at night. Health insurance, other kinds of insurance too, for the people from CMB. But what gets me up in the morning, actually, I really like what I do. And, I think that I work with a company that we have many people with 20+ years experience. And I think that we work very well as a team to make our company the best that it can be. And we still have a long way to go, but that's what gets me up in the morning.
Again, I'm blessed. I just love my job. I can't help it. I like going to work every morning. I got to tell you though, at night, it is not infrequent before I go to bed, especially with any kind of bad weather, that I pray that every single one of my employees gets home
Safely.
to wherever they need to go. And like I said, they go home every single night. Everyone goes back and forth. But when you work for the Postal Service, everything is on a time schedule. And I do expect them to drive at all times and to drive well. And it is, from an owner standpoint, the buck stops here.
It's a worry in the back of your head. You can't have it worry you all the time, but when you are the boss, there is nobody else that takes that last step. There's nobody else that holds that last little piece. So you're it. So that's a little bit of a worry sometimes, but.
Patty?
I think all the regulations and every state having a different regulation. I thank God every day I don't have California. And what propels me in the morning is to get up and I love the challenge of all of that as well, and to work with my team to get it done.
Awesome. So I did bring some brochures. For those of you who didn't raise your hand for not being a member of the Women in Trucking Association, I would ask you to at least look and see if we can benefit you. We do have a lot of resources, a recruiting guide, an anti-harassment employment guide. I'll give you a tip in the recruiting guide. This usually gets people interested. Shannon, did you have a motorcycle? Ever? No, never? Well, 80% of the female drivers on our Facebook page, so this is not scientific, 80% of the female drivers on our Facebook page either had a motorcycle license or a motorcycle. So where do you think you should be recruiting? Right?
Harley.
What?
Harley.
Take one of your happy female drivers, put your company shirt on her, send literature with her, and put her in a charity run. So that's my tip for the day. I'd like to give away a free registration to our Accelerate Conference, which is September 30th to October 2nd. We're anticipating between 1,000 and 1,200 people this year. For you men, we want you there because it's 80% women at a trucking conference. So you will find someone to dance with at the parties. But so on the back table, there's a little yellow bag to put your business card in. And then I'll pick a winner, and it is transferable. So if you can't make it, it's just transferable. It's just a coupon. So how about a round of applause for these wonderful ladies? All right, we're good. Thank you.